at that. I need only say Josh's name and the recording begins. As always, on the ball. Thank you, Josh Muse. I know that our 1 o'clock public commenter, Lauren Polk of the Aldridge Public Library here in Barre, Vermont, just down the block from us at the Department of Libraries, is here with us. And I just want to welcome Lauren to share comments on inclusive services. And Lauren did provide written testimony that hopefully folks noticed got posted finally today. There was a little lag in getting it up. I'm sorry for that, but Lauren, I'm going to hand it over to you now. Feel free to show your face on your camera if you wish, and I will turn mine off so that you can have the focus, and we'll do about 10 minutes of up to 10 minutes of you talking and sharing what you'd like to share, and then we will the remaining 5 minutes of the time slot for folks to ask you questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So hopefully you guys can hear me and see me. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you, share the stories of Aldridge Public Library with you today. As Catherine mentioned, my name is Lauren Polk, and I'm the director for the library. We serve the city and the town of Barre, a population of around 17,000. This is a large library by Vermont standards in population, collection, and in size, as our building, which is just over 20,000 square feet, is the 4th largest in the state as of the 2021 statistics. Inclusion is and has been a must for Barre since its beginning. You've perhaps heard the myth of the name Barre being settled in a boxing match in a nearby barn over 230 years ago. I love this story because it's a wonderful reminder that diversity of ideas has always existed and will always exist, and communication and collaboration can be different for many people. Since that time, the Granite of Barre has brought some of the most diverse populations and peoples to Vermont through the beginning of the 20th century. Our library holds copies of both anarchist and socialist newspapers that were published here in Barre City, as well as Scottish, Lebanese, and Italian family stories that have named our streets, our stores, and our library. Barre today continues to be the Granite Center for the world, but we have also evolved to encompass some of the largest support systems for Vermonters in the county. Washington County Mental Health and the county's homeless shelter, Good Samaritan Haven, are located here, in addition to many low-income housing organizations such as Capstone, Central Vermont Adult Basic Education, and the Learning Together Preschool Center, which is a Head Start location, Restorative Justice, and the county's court services. This impacts our community as we are now also the place to go for help. This means the library has a wide variety of people we serve, and our rooms, collections, and programs all aim to encompass as much of the community as possible. Strong communities are a product of communication, connection, and belonging, and our library aims to reflect and promote these ideals for the greater Barre area. Because humans tend to look for patterns in behavior in order to process information, we're susceptible to cognitive biases that can get in the way of that communication and connection. So one of the most successful ways we've found to support belonging in our shared space is to identify unintended use, set expectations of behavior to promote the use, and find ways to communicate and enforce expectations uniformly, trying to recognize the cognitive biases in order to overcome them. As one example of this strategy, we have witnessed and heard a wide difference of opinion regarding noise permissions and problems in the library. Our Vermont room, which is located in the center of the building, is a cozy and somewhat removed space, and therefore it's perfect for small groups to gather and catch up. The building staff decided this area is most used for quiet conversation, and we've set up this expectation for activity in the room. Over time, I noticed that some patrons were receiving more complaints than others, and some were reprimanded more often as a result. The solution came in the form of a $15 noise meter indicator. Any noise over a certain threshold and the machine, which shows the decibels on the end of the room, would beep and notify both staff and the group that noise was reaching a level that would impact other rooms in the building. With this expectation, those noisy teenagers were given a clear expectation and they were happy to use the space accordingly. They would often even self-regulate. And if the knitting group set the alarm off during their meeting, the expectation would be universally enforced, which was important for both staff and for the teens. Another example comes in the form of service and support animals visiting our library. The law is clear that we are limited on inquiring about a service animal and what service that animal might provide. And public spaces have struggled with ways to ensure compliant building use and support equitable access. While other places of business will stress allowing the use of a service animal only, we have decided to enforce expectation instead. So any animal that breaks heel, is aggressive towards others, or is not housebroken can be asked to leave the premises regardless of their support or service animal status. For this reason, we created signage and expectations welcoming animals that comply with this behavior. Again, the expectation is clear, it's easier to enforce, and it's easier for our community to understand and agree to. Finally, we've created programs, collections, and uses for our building to support the needs recognized in the community. Without a dedicated teen space in Barrie, Aldrich was responsive to this need and incorporated a dedicated teen room in the library in 2014. This room is dedicated to middle and high school kids during after school hours, and the expectations are established to consider that use. And during the COVID pandemic, as churches were unable to open their doors for people experiencing homelessness, we worked with Barrie City Council to provide a before hours program in our Milne community room. This program allows anyone seeking a warm space or needing help with applications for services to come to the library as early as 8 a.m. Through this program, we've connected with dozens of people in the community, and we've helped many of them to connect with resources in the area that are created throughout our city. People experiencing homelessness, or even more broadly, poverty, will always be with us. Luckily, I'm not here today to advocate that we solve that problem. Instead, it is important to serve people in these circumstances, and we see all of those resources available in our community. I want to thank you for any of your work done to help with that, and assure you that as an information center for my community, I view my job in the library to spread the word of this resource as best as I can. What I am here today to advocate for actually goes beyond service. People experiencing homelessness or poverty can not only be served by a community, they must be part of the community. They need to feel welcomed and missed. They need to belong. They need to be represented as a part of that whole. And this cannot come with the caveat that their welcome is temporary or unfairly conditional. This is the great value of libraries: to welcome, to represent, and include all of the people within a community. I love and will always advocate for senior centers, youth centers, and homeless shelters, but a library is where all of these groups can come together and make a strong community. So in order to help the libraries with this work, the things that I would ask from the working group would be, first, to eliminate or reduce the use of and dependence on competitive grants to help support our capital, operations, and programs. Help us to focus on providing a quality product to our communities and eliminate spent costs associated with the grant applications. Second, to help us recruit and retain qualified librarians for our community classrooms. Of course, this has probably come up in other working group discussions. And finally, to be a part of your local library's community. The best way to see a community's entire culture and to become a part of it is to go to the library. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for for being here with us today. Hang on a second. I'm having a very strange view situation going on in my world, and I could only see you in the auditorium for some reason, which I think it's just me experiencing that. I want to open it up to the members of the working group to ask questions of Lauren about what she shared today.
No question, just a thank you for coming and bravo for your testimony.
Thank you so much.
Andy.
Hi, thanks for the testimony. I'm curious where the idea for the sound level meter came from. Was that something you guys thought up or something you learned about?
It actually came up through kind of the discussion of always having to go up and ask teens to be quiet, and then teens asking, well, why aren't they getting in trouble? They just laughed. And seeing that inequality, and then just kind of went on to Amazon and started doing some looking into options to kind of understand and set the expected noise level. I mean, first it was a Google search of, what is loud, and understanding decibel readings, and then from there it just kind of grew legs on its own.
Yeah, I just think that's a fabulous solution to the problem. So I was curious how y'all came to it. So thank you.
Any other questions from the working group members? I have a question, actually. I'm wondering, oh, Christopher, you go for it.
Yeah, no, just a comment really that I appreciate the comment about grant applications. And we are a funder at Vermont Humanities as well. And I think kind of keeping up with best practices around grant funding, we're kind of constantly looking at ways to make the process simpler and easier, especially for smaller and more grassroots organizations. And so I just wanted to say I appreciate that comment. I don't see it as being particularly likely that the need to write grant proposals is going to disappear entirely, but I think there are things that folks on the philanthropy side can do to make it easier on the applicants.
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that comment. And I will just mention, the CAPTCHA that we all have to put in when we are trying to get into a website where you have to type in a weird word that's got augmented text. There was an individual who acknowledged that only takes about 2 seconds worth of time, but multiplied by millions of people who are putting in a CAPTCHA, it does represent a collective of essentially wasted time. And so he started utilizing scanned words and scanned PDF to text recognition software, which always has problems with old print. Maybe it can get the majority of a document, but miss one word. And he found that using that one word in the CAPTCHA, and then having millions of people type in the word would just verify what the word was. And he was able to use that spent time, which was for a security purpose, for the purpose of helping improve this PDF to text software. So in the same way, like a lot of the information that I give to grants, when we've applied to 4 competitive grants in the last 2 years, and we've been awarded one of them. But a lot of the information that I'm providing is stuff that I've provided to the Vermont Department of Libraries, to municipalities for appropriations. And I know that when our library is not awarded a grant, and maybe there are 90 other libraries like us, that's a lot of time and a lot of information. So if we can figure out a way to use that spent cost of the spent narrative work, whether it's even the Department of Libraries trying to use that to say how many people asked for HVAC improvements, what was the average cost, and understanding from there where we need to go in the future. something like that would be super, super helpful, because it is hard. It does take a lot of work, and it takes meeting with vendors, and I don't want that work to be for naught if we are one of those people who isn't awarded a grant. So
Well,
Thank
thank
you,
you
Lauren.
for sharing your ideas, Lauren, and for sharing your comments with us today. We really appreciate them. We're going to move now to our next public commenter, who is Tom Frank. Tom is a not just a member of the Able Library Advisory Board, but the chair of that board, and he's also the chair of the Vermont Board of Libraries, which advises me as the state librarian. And Tom is here to share his comments. Tom, we'll have about 10 minutes for you to share comments, and then about 5 minutes for the working group members to ask questions.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. And if you could beat me at about 9 minutes, that would be good.
Absolutely.
Okay, once again, my name is Tom Frank, and I should start by saying I'm legally blind, so I can't see any of you. You can see me, and I always say that's opposed to illegally blind. So reading is difficult, and I've stopped reading print, even with strong magnifying lenses. I'd say about 20, 30 years ago. Vision started going bad when I was 20. When I was in the service, my vision started going bad. And I could still read until in college, I couldn't anymore. Regular print, the VA, the Veterans Administration, has helped me getting various types of technology to enlarge the print. I had some very powerful magnifying glasses. But now I can't read the print. So since I was in New Jersey back in 1973 until moving to Vermont in 82, I relied tremendously on the special services or talking book library program. About 2 years ago here in Vermont, I think it was about two years, maybe it was 3 years ago, when the library was going to move to Barry, somebody said, well, special service library, that doesn't sound all that good. We should change the name. And I said, well, what type of names do people use nowadays? And they said, well, usually the name, they try to pick a name that describe what the agency or the organization does. And I said, well, what do we do? Well, we send out audio books, commonly referred to as talking books. We send out large print books, and I'll say we're one of the few libraries in the talking book libraries in the country that has a very large collection of large print books that we share with nursing homes, senior centers on a rotating basis. And a lot of people that are older, as they're losing their vision because of macular degeneration or similar diseases, they might be 70, 80. They still want to hold and still can read print. So we'd have a large print collection. So we do audio. We also do Braille through our relationship with the Perkins Library in Massachusetts. So folks that read Braille, and I'd say about 10% of the people classified as blind actually read Braille enough to read a book. And I said at that meeting, A-B-L-L, yeah, that's able, but we need an E. And somebody said electronic. Very good. So now we have it. We have the Able Library, and that sort of aligns with the National Library Service in Washington, D.C., with the Library of Congress, where we get the talking book part of the program. And their motto is, so all are able to read. And that's what we're doing. So we figured that everybody should have access to the printed word, even if it's through narration or large print or Braille, or to be able to access it online. And when I do it, my phone talks to me, my computer talks to me. For us visually paired people, I always say the 3 Bs, everything that we have either barks or babbles or beeps. So we rely on our hearing, and I'm glad that the decibel level is kept down in the library at Barry because noise is kind of distracting. So, and last time I checked, we sent out about 9,000 to 10,000 items per month. That's the talking books, the audible books downloaded directly or mailed out from the library in Barry. And now we only have 2 staff, full-time staff that does that, Sarah and Wendy, and they get it all out, and a half-time director, Karen Gravelin. So they're really working to their full limits, and with the technology, they're allowed to do a lot more than they were before. So that's that. What can you help us with? One thing is simply getting the word out. We need a little bit more publicity. Now that Karen, we have a halftime director, she's getting out, telling about, we have a printed brochure that goes out both in large print and Braille to get distributed. But I'm the former training director for the Assistive Technology Project with the state of Vermont. And I had worked when I was in Washington, D.C. I did a lot of training on Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which was before the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I've done a lot of training, and I found out that you can have the best services in the world, but it doesn't do any good if people don't know about it. We have a lot of users, but the word needs to get out everywhere that this service is available. And also the able library, everybody thinks blind, visually impaired. It's for anybody with a print disability. Could be dyslexia, it could be temporary disability. You could have Parkinson's and just not able to hold a book or turn the pages. Anything that prevents or hinders your ability to read the printed book. They're available to the able library. Local libraries, and this is one of my major points that I bring up at every one of our quarterly meetings, is that local libraries don't always have to say, well, okay, let's give you the number to the able library. Local libraries are also responsible for providing services to their clientele, to their patrons. So if somebody comes up in the library, and I assume they're all accessible, right, with ramps and working that, and there are funds now to help libraries to make their facilities physically accessible. Once they get in the door, if anybody sees, oh, are you having a little problem? Is there any other service that we can provide to you? You have to do it, diplomatically, but you can ask and promote the fact that somebody might need help. And you say, well, there's a poster on the wall over there. Yeah, that doesn't help if you can't read the poster. So more effort has to be out there to let people know that the services are available. Also, on the training side, 2 years ago, I was calling around to the local libraries around here and said, do you have any large print or talking computer software? No, we don't have anything. I said, do you have a Windows 10 computer? Did you upgrade? Yes. I said, then you have, your computer will talk, it will do magnification and all of those sorts of things. And I assume most libraries, if you have computers and do computer training, you have Windows 10 or 11, and it just needs, the word needs to get out and more training has to be provided. And I think I'm right at the end of my 10 minutes.
You are just about at it. I was coming on to let you know that you were there. So thank you, Tom. I really appreciate your joining us today. I know you've had a busy day of meetings, and I want to turn it over to the working group members to ask follow-up questions.
I know one hand was up.
It was me trying to
Oh, that was you.
flag you somehow without
Oh, okay.
interrupting your train
Yeah,
of
yeah.
thought. I think it is really interesting that because people don't need a service themselves, they may not realize that it is embedded in a product. For example, the Microsoft operating system versions that include all of these accessibility features. I do wonder how many people realize everything that's embedded in those products.
Yeah, once again, if you publicize, because your patron themselves may not need the service, but they have older parents, grandparents, or whatever. Oh, well, grandma can't see, and because magazines are available, books are available, there's large print music sheets available, there's all sorts available, and I think it's sort of incumbent on the local libraries to also not just say, oh, just call Montpelier or Barry, they'll do it. No, the local library needs to be providing these services and helping the people get those services. No questions?
I don't know. Does anyone
Yes.
else have questions? Whenever I don't get questions, I assume it's because I presented in such a thorough and careful
Such a
manner. And I'm seeing a
thorough
head
way.
nod right now from Wendy Sharkey that's
And
the case.
and I'll ask them, how many of you have gone into your library and seen what accessibility there are for large print books and all of that available, and the computer system and what training is available. I just charge you, because you're interested in libraries, to go into your library, local library, and ask that. Who, if I walked into this library and said, I understand that you provide computer training, can I? And they might say, well, no, it's not accessible. Oh, yes, it is. Oh, by the way, I'm a member of here in Milton. I'm from Milton. They have a book club, and Tom, there's usually about 15 people show up to the book club. In the last 6 years, Tom, I tell people it stands for token male. I'm the only male in 6 years that goes to the book club. But the books that they pick almost all, I'd say 95% of the time, they're in the able library, and I can download the book. Actually, I download the book before I leave and have access to it before the others pick up a copy of the book to read. So it allows me to participate not in something designed for the blind or visually impaired, but for the general public, and I can contribute and participate in that just like everybody else. Now, I would tell you the main reason that I go to it is because they bring wonderful desserts, and and being the token male, can I get you? Oh, sure. Oh, okay. Yes. Thank you very much. Yes. We have alternative measures as well.
I'm seeing a comment from one of our working group members. Jeanette Bear has written in the chat thread that she has a difficult time finding large print magazines, that is a challenge to find those for the collections and for personal use.
They are difficult. I know the Reader's Digest has large print, but also call Wendy and Sarah at the Able Library in Barry and ask them what are available. But also, if somebody's having problems reading the large print magazines, there are all sorts of ones through the Able Library that are online. As are newspapers through the National Federation of the Blind. There's an application that I have on my phone, and I can read newspapers around the world, and including here at home, 7 Days, let's see, 7 Days, Vermont Digger. they're available to print disabled individuals.
That's good to know. Yeah, I think that there are frequently situations where folks have had steadily decreasing vision throughout their lives, and then they slip into the zone where they actually could qualify for able library services and don't realize it, don't
Mhm.
realize that they are there yet. So as librarians who are serving the public, kind of scoping out the large print section and talking with people who are there, you can often find folks who do qualify for services and help them to get connected with them. Because, sometimes the person will ask for a suggested title, but then as they're talking with you, they're saying, like the print is getting smaller in the large print books, or maybe there could be is there an even bigger large print book? And then you realize there may be a need there for more than just the large print title. Maybe there's an additional need. Well, I want to thank you, Tom, for being here. We are on a super tight schedule, so we will
Yep.
let you go on to your next activities for the day and the weekend. Thank you so much for being here. You're welcome to stay with
Okay.
us. Our next
Thank you for having me.
public commenter is SB Hamilton from the Vermont Migrant Education Program. And I'm not confident that I said your name properly, so please correct me. Oh, we can't hear you though. You're muted.
I have to turn the camera and the microphone on. Espe Hamilton, and I thank you so much for inviting me. I love libraries, so it's a pleasure to be here. So I lead migrant education initiatives for the University of Vermont Extension. And our main funding is a migrant education program grant that's from the Federal Agency of Education. With that grant, we serve approximately 300 children and youth a year who are involved with temporary or seasonal agricultural work in Vermont. Either their parents are doing that work or they themselves are doing that work. We also work very, very closely with the migrant health team at UVM Extension, which provides healthcare access support to more than 700 individuals annually. There's a general association of the term migrant farm worker with workers coming from Mexico and Central America, or in the case of apple harvesting in Vermont, Jamaica. However, migratory agricultural workers can come from any country and can speak any language, and we enroll a significant number of what my colleague calls regular old white Vermonters into our program because they work seasonally or temporarily in agriculture and have been moving frequently. That said, I'm pretty much here to talk about workers from Mexico and Central America and their families. So like I said, I love libraries, and I was taught, that libraries are safe spaces that exist in most communities where I can go to read, to rest, to work, to get information. Whenever I travel, I look for the library. That's part of my culture as a middle-class person from the northeastern United States. It's not so much a part of the culture of rural Mexico. So our staff works to teach you, we do work to teach youth and families about the services that are offered at their local libraries. And when it makes sense, we'll meet our program participants at the library, read books, show them the options, use the internet to help people study for the GED, attend story time with new parents and their kiddos, and generally try to show them the ropes, right, of an important community resource. We find that without our taking people and showing them, sometimes several times, especially newly arrived Mexican and Central American farm workers aren't likely to visit the library or access library services on their own. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about like the barriers that we see and some of the opportunities that we see. Some of the barriers are just have to do with the work and where it happens, right? People can't get to the library because they don't have driver's licenses or cars. People can't get to the library because they work nights or they work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And on their day off, they want to be video chatting their family back home and going grocery shopping. So that's like some things that are just structurally preventing people physically going to the library, even if they know about it and they know that there are all sorts of great opportunities for them there. there are also obviously a range of wonderful online services that are offered through the Vermont state libraries in general and individual libraries. And a lot of times, like, lack of technology skills, lack of quality home internet, prevent access to that stuff or even to learning about it. Language is, a huge deal, right? So especially for folks who are working less or who have been here less time, I see, and my background is as an English language educator, but I see like a much lower level of English than I see in English language learners in larger urban areas. So like a young woman and young children who might come to the library might really not have the English even to say, hello, I need help, or my name is so and so. So people don't think there's anything for them at the library. And they don't want to put themselves in situations where they're going to have to converse in English. That is like part of sort of a larger fear of being in public because of language and because of immigration status. Many of the youth and families that we work with experience really high levels of stress whenever they need to be in public, and they need to allocate that stress to essential trips like medical care and grocery shopping. Another thing, is that people are highly mobile. And so even if someone, I live in Middlesex, even if I get like my library card at the Kellogg Hubbard Library and I understand what their services are and I like going there, if I move to a different town, I have to do the whole thing over. I have to, the person has to get a whole new library card, learn a whole new building, staff, schedule of events. And getting a library card, I know y'all make it as easy as possible, right? It's very easy. I think of it as very easy, but it still requires usually some kind of interaction in English and a proof of address, which can be pretty challenging. It's quite common for farm workers not to have ID and not to receive mail at home, not to have utility bills. So like one suggestion might be like, what would easy transfer of library cards between libraries look like if that doesn't already exist again? So opportunities I see, a focus on outreach to farm workers, especially in Franklin, Addison, and Orleans counties where the farm worker populations are higher because there are more big farms. And a focus on young children and parents. Right now, I was talking to the coordinator of the health program, and she says they are currently working with 21 pregnant people. So we are seeing kind of a baby boom as people feel more comfortable here. They maybe a man has been here working for a while and sending money home, and then eventually brings the wife and children to join, and then or the wife, and then they have a child, and then that wife and child might be home more frequently and looking for something to do and interested in starting to access library services. So bilingual story times, yes, for sure. But so make sure that those are actually going to be do the outreach to make sure that those are going to be significantly attended by native Spanish speakers. I've heard from people who have, been suggested that they go to those and go to them and come back and they're like, but it was all white families and everyone was speaking English. So that could be really awkward, right? I think collaborations with schools is another really great way to reach migratory families who have children. Because the kiddos are there and then they're like, oh, I love these books. They're so cool. And they're learning about what's at the library. And that can really, the children can be the ambassadors for the parents and the uncles and the brothers and all of those people who are involved. Everyone knows everyone. Some of the things that I see, happening and there's English classes at the library in Burlington, right? Most of the farm workers are not living in Burlington. There aren't a lot of big dairy farms, for example, in Chittenden County. And so looking at those other, the Vergennes Library, the Enosburg Library, some of those other locations as a place to focus on some English classes and tutoring. Citizenship classes, somewhat less useful for this population. GED support and computer instruction that's in Spanish. And as I thought, as Tom was saying, library staff who are knowledgeable about the language functions on their computers, so that when someone sits down and they're like, oh, this is all in English, and they look to a library staff person for help, that person can say like, hey, this is how you change everything to Spanish, right? And this is where I will stop because I see my time. Outreach, Spanish-speaking staff at libraries, to the extent that those people exist, giving those folks some space and some support to do outreach personally to the farm worker community, because relationships, we know this for everyone, but especially very much so for this population, relationships are super key. And so outreach in Spanish that's text or radio or whatever is very useful, but if that language access isn't there at the library when the person shows up, that actually can be sort of worse. Something was promoted to them in Spanish and they get there and there's no one they can talk to. So I think I'll leave it there. I personally delighted to talk to anyone at any library, anytime, about coordinating events together, working together, how recommendations for bilingual books, whatever it is, ways that we can support you guys.
Well, thank you so much. I'm gonna try to Espe?
Espe, yeah.
Espe, great. Okay. We have one hand raised from Denise Hersey, and then we have a comment that's a question. So let's go with Denise first, and then we'll take the comment of the question from the chat thread.
Yay.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm so glad to hear from you, in part because I work at the Dana Medical Library at the University of Vermont, and we've been trying to make greater connections to the groups that you're working with. We do have a fluent Spanish-speaking librarian who is interested in working with the migrant community here, both in this terms of helping with providing some basic health information, but also as a librarian who might be able to direct them to other resources that they can use in their native languages, or, just kind of guiding them through some certain processes. And she's been trying to figure out how to make that connection. So maybe you and I could touch base offline, because we've been hoping to do that.
Yeah, let me just put my email in the chat, because I would love to talk with you about that. And I can refer you to my colleague, Naomi, who runs the Migrant Health Program. And you guys should be in touch.
Thanks.
I mean, it's just my name at uvm.edu. You can probably figure it out. Catherine, you're muted.
Sorry, long day. What is your question from Jeanette Bear in the chat? What is your experience in reaching out via the farm owners to their workers? Has that ever been a successful approach for you?
Well, I mean, it is a lot of our approach. Like we meet the people that we work with by going to farms and knocking on the door and being like, hey, do you have any new workers here who are under 22 and haven't graduated from high school? And so they know us, and especially if there were like an event or something, say at the Vergennes Library, or there were English classes starting at the Enosburg Library, I would definitely at least try to reach out to some of the farm owners of the bigger farms there and say, hey, just wanted to let you guys know this is happening, share with your folks. But we have a lot of like direct connections to workers, and I would be also going to share with like the person that I know at the farm who knows everybody, like, hey, this is happening, tell all your friends.
Well, so that leads me to have a question, which is if a public library knows that there are community members who are migrant workers, and they don't really know, they see them at the library, but they don't follow them back to their workplace. They don't
Right.
know from where do these people come and where are they exactly? If they were trying to share information about a service that they provide at the library or a program, could just your average public librarian in Vermont kind of ping you all to try to find out how to get that to get some help getting the message about a service or program to the community members?
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good way to do it. I mean, the only real other sort of what we would call like Latino serving organization in Vermont is Migrant Justice, and they are focused really a lot more in the northern part of the state. They are also a great resource in terms of like, hey, we have this, can you pass this information along? But yeah, I would be totally happy for like a librarian, where the Derby librarian, to ping me and say, hey, we're going to do such and such a thing. Or like, not like, where do these people work that I saw in my life? Are they documented or what? Like, I'm not going to answer that kinds of questions, but helping people figure out how to do outreach, I would be delighted.
Great. Well, one final question from Wendy Sharkey before we move to our next presenter.
Well, I don't know whether it's so much as a question or rather than a statement. Here in Bennington, we've had a lot of Afghan families move into the area, and we've been communicating with the Open Arms group that aiding the Afghan patrons. And one of their things that they've found to stop the access to even computers is the keyboard.
Yep.
The keyboard, we have a regular keyboard. Hey, that's great, but they don't understand a single symbol on it. And so now we're looking for, and if anyone knows where to source it, keyboards in Dari. But we wouldn't have known that, we thought, oh yeah, we're offering people laptops and we're offering people and yes, they've got access, but not if they don't understand what the symbols are on the keyboard. And I think the only way to find these things out is to connect with people who are closer to the population you're trying to serve.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. It was really nice to hear from you. Please feel free to stay on for future comments or to join us for the rest of the meeting. We're going to move to our next presenter, who is our next commenter, who's Nate Eddy of the Winooski Public Library.
Thanks, Kathy. Glad to be here. I'm going to leave my camera off because I'm somewhat entertaining a puppy right now. So
I think that's a reason to turn the camera on.
Yeah, right. Things are there's a little bit of chaos. But thanks so much for having me. Esbe, thanks for the information. I thought your comments about the library cards and being transferable were interesting, and I just wanted to plug, we're part of the Home Card Library Network, which Winooski card holders have access to 25 other libraries in and around Northwest Vermont. And the libraries that participate in that, it's a vice versa trade-off with everybody. So on a smaller level, that is happening. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the Winooski Library and the services that we are providing to the public. And I'm going to read the written testimony that I submitted to the working group. And then I'm happy to answer any questions. So the Winooski Memorial Library celebrates diversity, equity, and inclusion, and welcomes the rich tapestry of experience and background among all members of the Winooski community. As the most racially and ethnically diverse city in Vermont, with nearly 15% of residents born outside of the United States and over 20 different languages spoken within our schools, the library serves a unique role as both connector and service provider for our new American immigrant and refugee populations. We offer a number of programs in support of English language learners, including weekly ELL classes and technology assistance in partnership with the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. as well as other programs that work to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion within our community. These include or have included restorative justice circles in partnership with Spectrum Youth and Services, Arabic language learning classes and monthly bilingual story times, free veggie and produce distribution to address food insecurity in partnership with Intervale Center, and weekly storytime visits to the Thrive After School and Summer Program, which is a 3-star licensed child care provider here in Winooski at the school. The library also provides a welcoming and inclusive space for community members and offers access to a very diverse collection of print materials and online resources, translated vital documents such as library card applications, which we have in Arabic, Burmese, Nepali, Somali, and Swahili. After hours space availability for community members to host meetings, and a dedicated staff committed to promoting open and equal access for all. Most recently, Kirsten Wilson, who is our youth services coordinator, has enrolled in a Swahili course in an effort to reduce language barriers among our non-English speaking patrons. And while providing these diverse programs and services is a great strength, the library also faces considerable challenges presented by space constraints, limited shelving and storage, and the number of individuals currently on staff. We are a small but mighty team of 2.5 full-time equivalent, working in approximately 2,000 square feet of open floor plan and without access to separate meeting rooms, in-house storage, or office space, all of which makes scaling to meet larger community needs and demands difficult. In comparison to other Vermont libraries serving similar sized communities, and there's 32 libraries that serve populations 5,000 and greater, we rank last in square footage of library space, last in square footage per capita, last in total collection holdings, and second to last in paid staff hours per week, which is 73. And this according to FY21 annual reporting statistics compiled by the Vermont Department of Libraries. These challenges are not new, but they do limit the full potential and position of the library within the Winooski community. It is my hope that as we continue to grow our programs and services, we can at the same time direct and allocate the needed resources and funding that will allow us to scale in both space and staff and to maintain a welcoming and inclusive spirit for all who visit us. And that is the testimony. I'm happy to answer questions about Winooski, about our services, anything that's out there.
Thank you so much, Nate. I'm going to call on Kelly McCagg, whose hand is raised.
Okay.
Hi, Nate.
Hey.
I have several questions. One, what kind of dog is it?
It is. She is a mix. She's like we did embark DNA test on her, not to get too in the weeds here, but she's like a mix of pit bull, husky, terrier, hound, lab, and like 2 other breeds.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you had mentioned that you do bilingual story times.
Yes.
What other language do you guys cover?
Arabic.
Oh wow, okay.
And that was a former program. So we applied for a grant through I'm blanking on it. The acronym is CLP, which is Critical Languages Program, and received a grant in which we were able to bring in an instructor who offered both the 10-week Arabic language learning class and the bi-monthly story times.
Awesome. That's amazing. And so they probably helped translate the library card application into Arabic, but how did you get it translated into the other languages that you guys offer?
So that is through AALV has translators. And so they're paid for their work, and the city of Winooski contracts out to them for some of these services. And also if we ever need interpreters, like we lean on them as well
Okay.
for events. So they were the folks who translated the applications for us.
Awesome. And my last question is, what is the support of your board like? You guys, more than anyone else in the state, I believe, need, if not a new building, at least a new, bigger, larger storefront. And the statistics definitely support that. What are you hearing from the select board or whatever?
Yeah, so yeah, I appreciate those comments. So the library, we're unique. We have a library committee. We do not have a library board. So we have a committee of community members who are appointed by city council for 3-year terms. It's a committee of 5 members. So they are incredibly useful to bounce ideas off around policy, some procedural stuff. And while they don't have oversight at all over any of the library budget, they do help craft budget during the budget season. So really the challenge is Winooski is a very small square mileage. We're about 1.5 miles within the city, and there's not a lot of room to grow. The population is growing, but there's not like a lot of room to grow. So the tax base has stayed.
You guys have been growing up.
Right. You can grow up, but the tax base has remained pretty static over the years. We're in the middle of budget season now. There's definitely a recognition that the library needs a new space, but there's just little appetite to present at this point, like a bond or a tax increase to the Winooski community that would fund that.
It's too bad that someone there, because I know when you drive down the corridor there's so much new construction of where they are actually building up.
Yeah.
That one of those contractors, Ireland, who has money coming out of everywhere, isn't willing to donate and put their name on something for a library.
I completely agree. And I mean, for anyone who's seen where our library is, it's the visibility of our space
it's hard to find.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And so one of the things that I'm working with on the committee is like at least to improve our wayfinding and signage within the city that lets folks know where the library is. So those are some of the challenges. And I mean, just in this past budget that is being worked on right now, we had a 14-hour a week front desk person, library clerk, who had been funded via some ARPA funding, via ESSER funding, and we were hopeful to move it into the city budget, and that didn't go through. So we're losing that person. So we're down even more staff.
Can I ask a question, Catherine? Of you?
Sure, I can try to answer the question, but
can VLA as a body, can we lobby for individual libraries to get increased funding? Like, can we organize in that way?
in VLA?
Yeah. Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, it's a professional organization, and I don't know that there are any statutes that. Are you asking if you can lobby the department for more money?
No, I'm asking if VLA could like go to city council in Winooski and be like, what is your problem? Let's support your community and support the library.
I think VLA can, just like VLA can lobby the legislature, VLA could advocate for things at a local level. I don't know if that's, I don't know your bylaws in and out, but my sense is that you could write letters of support for things, and you could participate in community meetings and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
That's my sense.
Thanks, Nate. I think you're doing a great job with very
Yeah.
little.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Jeanette Bear. Jeanette, I thought I saw your hand, but now it seems to have gone down.
I'm sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
I was wanting to speak to Kelly's question about lobbying. And I'm assuming that VLA is a 501c3. And if so, you are only permitted to spend a very small percentage of your resources for direct lobbying in order to protect your tax exempt federal status. So you just have to be careful what percentage of the work the organization does to keep your C3 status.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette. Christopher Kaufman-Elstrom.
Just a response to Jeanette. I'd be happy to talk with anybody offline about what the rules are around lobbying. It is true that you have to be careful about losing your status if you're seen as a lobbying organization and spending too much, but it's actually much higher than people think. So I'd be happy to check in with anybody about that in a separate conversation.
Thank
Great,
you. That's really helpful. And it's great to have you here as a resource for organizations. Well, Nate, I just want to thank you for coming to talk with us today, and I'm hoping to actually be in touch to schedule a visit to your library soon. I'm eager to visit Winooski, to visit the public library there. So hope to meet you in person soon. I want to turn now to Christopher, who has offered to provide testimony today as well. And Christopher, just going to hand it off to you for the next 15 minutes.
All right. I will try and be coherent about this. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare, but I think I can manage. Kathy asked me if I could come and speak to issues around LGBTQ plus folks and public libraries and inclusion, and I'm happy to do so. You may be wondering why me, why the guy at Vermont Humanities. We do a fair amount of LGBTQ programming now, but I will also just note for the record that I am a longtime professional queer person, having worked both as the program director at Outright Vermont, serving queer youth, and also as the first executive director at the Pride Center of Vermont when it was known as RU12. During my time working for the Vermont Community Foundation, I was also responsible for diversity and equity grant making, which included the Samara Foundation, which serves LGBTQ communities. So I have spent a fair amount of time in this space and continue to be interested in spending time in that space as I work here at Vermont Humanities. And some of you may have noticed that there's been a significant amount of queer programming over the last few years. So I'm just going to start out by saying, that libraries are most often, but not always, safe spaces for LGBTQ people. And there are many, many stories in the world from queer folks, both stories that I know about and actual documented information that cite libraries as one of the first sources of factual information for LGBTQ young people as they're beginning to explore questions of identity and self in their lives. I can certainly speak to my own experience as a young person going to the Bixby Library in Virgins and using the old card catalogs to look up terms that I may have heard of, usually in a negative light, to figure out if I could find positive information and factual information about the person that I was growing into. And so there's a long history of queer people seeing libraries as safe spaces, using libraries as safe spaces, even if they aren't actually talking to the librarians, right? Oftentimes we would find those books and go off into the darkest corners that we could find in order to read them. Hopefully that is beginning to change, and more libraries, more librarians are becoming more outwardly supportive of and expressive of support around LGBTQ communities. The principles of intellectual freedom and the freedom to read generally work in favor of queer folks in libraries, for sure, right? As we think about our own professional practices of providing resources to every member of our community, that generally means that most libraries are working pretty hard to provide sources of information for everyone. And that includes queer folks. I would note that there is often a sense that that the queer community is a monolith. That is not true, of course, and it's been great to hear LGBT concerns kind of referenced throughout the day. I think it's particularly important to recognize that queer people are not all white. There are plenty of Black and Brown and Indigenous queer people. There are a lot of queer folks in the New American refugee and immigrant community and in the migrant farmer community. And so being aware of providing resources that are queer friendly out to those communities as well is important. Most libraries these days are interested in providing comprehensive programming, and they frequently are recognizing, and I hope that many of you are recognizing, Pride celebrations every year in June, that you're promoting LGBTQ books during Banned Book Week, that you're looking at the historical moments and providing opportunities to celebrate those, Stonewall and others, and National Coming Out Week in October, of course. Is a time when libraries often and frequently are providing public programming, displays of books and things like that. There has also, I would say, recently been a real recognition of the need to provide developmentally appropriate all ages programming to support families, seniors, and kids of all ages, including, of course, the increasingly popular / notorious Drag Queen Story Hour. A lot of lectures and continuing education, including programming coming out of my organization at Vermont Humanities, and LGBTQ author visits, are among the ways that libraries can continue to provide support in that community. I know many of you like to have folks like Alison Bechdel come to your libraries, and there are lots of other choices. There's also, as you know, a really robust young adult literature community right now that helps to make LGBTQ youth much more visible, including my most recent favorite, They Both Die at the End, and its sequel, The First to Die at the End, which are awful, but they are terrific books. All of this, of course, is in support of a concept that you all work with every day around libraries, books, reading, literature as windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors for your community. All of that is very positive, but it wouldn't be right to not also note that we are in a deeply precarious moment. Intellectual freedom and the freedom to read is under attack by politicians and by media personalities across the country. We're seeing that every day. It's getting scarier and scarier. Bills are being introduced in legislators across the country that would really limit the ability of librarians and libraries to provide those windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors to everybody in their community. Librarians, especially, of course, in schools, are seeing efforts to criminalize their work as part of a very high level, sophisticated, and coordinated scapegoating of LGBTQ kids, especially trans kids, and of Black and Brown youth. This has a deeply chilling effect on librarians and libraries' willingness to promote LGBTQ programming, and we see that even in Vermont. We had an experience just this past week where a librarian from a rural area expressed some reluctance to program around LGBTQ literature because of the potential fear of a reaction in their community. I would say, though, that, although we are seeing attacks on the freedom to read directed at LGBTQ books and brown and black books, a lot of the original impetus for those campaigns is coming from out of state. And I know Kellogg Hubbard Library had this experience when they programmed Drag Queen Story Hour about a year ago. They got a lot of calls about it, but almost none of them were from people in Montpelier or even in Washington County. Most of them were from people out of state. It's coordinated by national groups and media organizations, and they're really finding ways to use Vermont as an example of the things that they're trying to attack. They do trickle down to the local level, though, and attacks on programming and collections are happening here in Vermont, including, in places as diverse as Canaan, Randolph, Springfield, and Chester, among others, all of which stories you probably have known or have followed over the last few years. I'm going to pause there and open it up for questions. I think I'm about halfway through my time. I'm about at the 10-minute mark. And I'm happy to take any questions about other things that I've observed and that we might be able to do.
Thank you so much, Christopher. Members of the working group, do you have questions? Meg.
Hi, Christopher. First, I just want to thank you for that really comprehensive, urgent, important message around supporting LGBTQ authors, programming, events, and Vermont's not immune. In my position with VISLA, I know of challenges specific last year in communities, even including Essex and Rutland, around the book Genderqueer specifically. So yes, local community members taking a national rhetoric and applying it to their local school boards. Thankfully, as far as I know, all the school boards and superintendents have upheld maintaining, keeping books in their libraries. This one's specifically genderqueer. I would say, though, that what is an issue is this idea of soft censorship, and you touched on that with, the reluctance of having LGBTQ programming in libraries, and I think that happens in school libraries a lot. There's a lot of gatekeeping with librarians choosing not to put books on their shelves. And I think that we could do some more education and awareness around that as a state. That is a form of censorship. So yeah, I would just offer that piece, as well as to be always mindful of including queer authors in every display year round, obviously for Pride, but every display that we put up, every kind of programming, every time we book talk a book to students. And a plug for Corey McCarthy, who is a queer author. He lives in Montpelier, and he's coming to U32 in March. So perhaps we could create like a directory of Vermont authors, queer Vermont authors, who would be available to visit schools for programming, book talks, to amplify their work and their voices. I could almost see like curating like a list of like essential books to have in your collection as a starting ground for every single library in the state. And that might take off some pressure from specific librarians around concerns in their own communities if we had like a state list, like not a list, but a suggested list, right? Whether it's from the Humanities Council, whether it's from our coalition together. But no, I mean, you've done a great job, Christopher. I mean, the book that we did, in partnership with the schools, which now I'm blanking on, the Sarah Hester book.
We Contain Multitudes.
We Contain Multitudes, of course, was groundbreaking, and sparked conversations in schools, centering a story on two high school boys who fall in love. And, the more we normalize telling stories that aren't cis heteronormative for our young people, the more they see themselves represented in their books. And as well, the more cis het folks can build empathy and compassion for experiences other than their own. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I think that term soft censorship is really important. We were in a committee meeting for next year's Vermont Reads book. We're down to our top 3. 2 of them are LGBTQ centered stories. And one member of the committee specifically said, I would have this book in my collection, but I'm not sure I would promote it as a Vermont Reads book. specifically because of the young love relationship being same sex. It was intense. It was hard for the queer people in the room to hear
Yeah.
that.
I mean, we can't guarantee safe spaces, right?
Right.
Harm happens, and I think leaning in and calling people in. I always think it's these wonderful opportunities to call people in, to expand how people think about these things. It also made me think, as I was taking notes during your great presentation, is around like our state book awards. The Green Mountain Book Award list, the Golden Dome list. I mean, it was formerly known when it was the Dorothy Campbell Fisher list. And there were those concerns like, oh, haven't we already chosen enough books about Black and Brown folks? There were these conversations happening at that time. And so I think even on those committees to ensure that these issues are talked about, before book lists are chosen, because so many school librarians and public librarians use those lists, especially with small budgets, to build their collections. And we want to ensure that they're as diverse as possible.
I go back to Susanna's point at the beginning of the day. I think she pulled a tweet from somewhere that said, if you're concerned about representation, you're probably overrepresented.
Yeah, it's interesting that tweet. I pinged Gina to say, we need to make sure this quote gets into the minutes. So that was kind of yeah. It's an important one. Well, Christopher, I really appreciate your sharing comment and doing it kind of on the spot and with such short notice, and really hit on so many important points. And I think it's a good launching point to our conversation about what did we hear today, the discussion of the working group on what we heard today. So let's move into that agenda item officially. We're sort of already there mentally, I think, with some of what we've just been hearing in response to Christopher's comments. Everyone's been actively participating today, and I really appreciate that. I think it's important that we identify some of the things that we've heard, and by that I mean I'd like for you all to identify some of the things that you have heard today. So I'd love for folks to come on the screen as you talk if you're in a spot where you feel comfortable doing that. And I'd love to hear from everybody in the working group, about something that they heard today that they think is important to kind of keep front of mind as we're writing the report, areas that they think we should follow up on more, statements or points that you think could be recommendations, areas for the working group to develop a recommendation. So please raise your hands, and we'll start with Kelly.
I definitely think we should offer some continuing education or workshops or something on like racial equity. And I'm a little disturbed, Christopher, on that comment being said in the awards committee. That you had just mentioned that, yeah, they would have it in their collection, but they really don't want it being, for Vermont Reads. The fact that that was said today now, in this time, I find very disturbing. So definitely education about soft censorship, I think needs to be done. I have to say that I thought the most enlightening session that we've had so far prior to this was when we heard a lot about the school librarians and how much things had changed since COVID. And just, I think they were talking about programming specifically, but this one trumps that. So it was definitely thought-provoking today.
Thanks, Kelly. Meg?
I will echo what Kelly just said. More education is going to be necessary, and perhaps even like mentoring or coaching librarians. I know in VISLA we have a really successful mentoring project, a coaching program, mentoring program that we've been running the past couple of years. And like how do we do that in a way where it's currently practicing librarians? It's not that you're new, but it's some sort of like to know that someone can help guide you make these decisions might make librarians feel braver, in making decisions, knowing that they've got the support and the policies. We got to look at policies, ensuring that every public and school library has the policies on the books to support inclusive collections and reconsideration and in the event of challenges that should be par for the course in every one of our libraries in the state. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. And then I would just echo, the word barriers came up a lot for me today. And I really would love to dig into the barriers that are at all of our libraries, from fines to replacing books to language barriers, programming barriers, all the kind of barriers, and make some recommendations on a number of different points for our libraries.
Yeah. Meg. Oh, no, you are Meg. Sorry, just got confused. Wendy, like in the wrong square. The heck?
I think that today what I've heard above all else is that there's still much work to be done in every single aspect of accessibility throughout the state. It doesn't matter whether that is physical access to the building or access to materials or anything. Even down to the more socialization for the homeschoolers, and so it just went on. Every time, every session, every speaker said there was more to be done.
Karen?
So I feel like I'm a little bit echoing what Meg already said, but I just think that amplifying this has been such a great session and so good to hear from such a variety of people across the state. And I'm really thankful that Kathy and your team were able to put together such great speakers for us to consider today. I almost feel like I know that these meetings are public, and the recording and the transcript will all be posted on the website, and that's good. But I almost feel like this could be like a whole conference day, like if we had sort of this and some roundtable time for people to talk. So, yeah.
Well, let's think about that for a second, because when I was working with the team and the department to try to, and I want to give some kudos to two particular people that I worked with extensively. One of them is Jeanette Schaefer, and the other one is Karen Gravlin. They really sat down with me and planned out, like, who could we ping? Who could we talk to? Who could we do this? And Tom McMurdo gave us some feedback and helped out with some logistics in this as well. But really, I think a lot of the heavy lifting went to that team, the advancement team, but those two particularly. I said to Josh Muse this morning, it feels like we're hosting a conference. Like this is like a big weird lift, and almost everything else in my world has ground to a halt, which is a little bit scary since I've got my first budget hearing on Tuesday. But it's a big one, and I think that a lot of what we heard today, it is a little bit strange. It would feel funny to say to people, hey, this was a great meeting, you should watch all 6 hours of it. But maybe what we as a group could do is to recommend that we have a specific, maybe a working group recommendation would be that we try to have a day that's talking about these issues of inclusivity, and to plan like a conference type event. And it doesn't need to be the case that we wait until this is complete and wrapped up to begin planning that. But it does feel like it would be really good for other people to actually step away from their computers, come to a space, be able to have these conversations and think about these things together and have more time with some of the folks that we heard from today, because it felt a little rushed. It was like everybody, you wanted to go extra with everybody, and there's no time to do that.
I will say
Can I
that,
add a note to that too? I'm sorry, go ahead, Meg.
no, go
I
ahead.
was, yeah, just gonna say briefly that I think, doing continuing education is so important. Absolutely, I am all behind that. Write us a grant proposal, we will support it. And also, it's not a one-day thing, right? It's a perpetual thing, it's a constant thing. And that's one of the messages that I take out of today, is that it is a journey that we're on forever, right? This is not something where we get to decide we're done, we've done enough. Um, and that is the attitude that we take here at Vermont Humanities. And we know that we're always in learning mode, that we're always doing this work, and that it's not something that is separate from First Wednesdays or Vermont Reads or whatever other program we're doing. It is everything. It is the all. Constantly. We don't have a separate diversity and equity committee because it is our mission for everything that we do. So that's just a big takeaway for me, especially around inclusion and anti-ableism. I think that is a place where many of us are deeply behind, and I very much appreciated the pieces of the day that were about that.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, to expand, maybe it's to Christopher's point, I like that image that we're on a journey and it's continuous, and there's not an end point to it, that this is just an ongoing thing. So maybe even thinking about, do we work together to plan a recurring annual set of workshops around these topics for the library community? I think that could be really powerful. Let's hear from some other folks too. So we haven't heard from Susan, and I think Susan's back with us. Did Susan here, or did she jump off again? She might not be here. And then Andy had to hop out for something. But did we hear from Jeanette?
I just looking back over my notes, I was a little taken aback with Susanna Davis's picture of the librarian sitting at her desk with her cup of tea, that we weren't doing enough. In that, I think a lot of us feel like we are spinning our wheels just as fast as we can to keep up what is already on our plate, that to go out looking for more to put on our plate is overwhelming. But the more I think about it, the more I think she's exactly correct, that we don't do enough going out in the community looking for what needs to yet be done. So that was my big takeaway.
I thought she was putting that picture there almost ironically on the outreach slide. So I didn't take it that way. And I think the thing that's tough is that I know we're all doing so much, and then there's still this need, right? So it is challenging. Karen, I think Karen's hand was next, and then Kelly's.
Yeah, so just really quick, I want to make sure if we think about extending this conversation into some other event, ways that we can call people into the conversation so that we don't end up with an echo chamber of preaching to the choir. Like, there's a lot of people who are already, can always do more and do better, but who are kind of like, on the path already. How can we call in those folks who might need more support or feel less comfortable in the space? And so we can have less of those comments like in Christopher's meeting the other day.
Meg? Meg, you're muted.
Kelly, did you want to go? I think she
Oh,
was.
Kelly, it was Kelly and then Meg. I'm sorry, but I clearly have an unconscious bias for the people on camera. I'm sorry, Kelly.
Oh, no, it's fine. I just wanted to say to Jeanette, it's not so necessarily doing more, it's kind of changing our priorities a little bit. We're working on our strategic plan right now, and one of the things that I'm trying to get my trustees to buy into is that we need to go out into the community more. I have one trustee in particular who's very gung-ho about, reaching the refugee population, which I totally support and want to do, but she thinks that we're supposed to do it by busing them to us, or, getting a bookmobile, which we've already done and it didn't work well, something very complicated and expensive, when it could be as simple as us going to a facility that's already over in the neighborhoods where they live, and during a story time, or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be all the hours that you're doing now and something else. You can shift priorities a little bit. So that's all I wanted to say.
I wanted to jump on that for a second, because one of the things that has happened in my career is that I try to do outreach, and then people tell me what they think a librarian wants to hear. So I go to a group of youth experiencing homelessness in San Francisco, and I ask them, what would you like from us at the library? And they want to do a book club. And then I ask, what book would you like to read? And then they tell me the book they want to read, and then we buy the book, and then we host the book club, and nobody shows up. Nobody comes. Because they think of us as like, they're trying to please us. There's something that people want to please librarians. I don't know why that is. They want us to be happy. They hold us on this weird pedestal. And so I really feel like there is an outreach need here, Kelly, that I see. And it's not just we go to them and we tell them about what we do. We actually have to go to them and listen to what they need. And then we have to develop responsive services.
Yes.
So like, the best thing for me that ever came, and it took years for it to happen, and I had even left the branch serving those particular youth. But the best thing that ever happened was somebody said, we really need a sewing machine and access to it. Like, we need more pockets. Clothes don't have enough pockets for people experiencing homelessness. We need somebody who knows how to sew, and we need a sewing machine. And it was like, thank you. We will make a program with sewing machines available, and like, it took years, but that program finally happened at that branch, and people came. And one of the best things for the library outreach to that community was actually that their building was taken from them, their space was taken from them, and they started programming in the space themselves. And then the librarians could welcome the kids directly and like be a part of the activities on a weekly basis. So there's really, I think that sometimes we have to actually learn how to listen and how to shift. Yesterday I was interviewed by a reporter from, I think, the Newport Herald, and they were asking about what do we foresee in library budgets, and it's like, well, it's going to be tight. Like, what do we always foresee in library budgets? And there are some tough decisions, because if we've been serving this population and we've been serving them well and they're really happy, they might even be the ones funding everything, right? Like, they're the tax base and they seem happy, and it's like the white wealthy people, and if we change the programming, will they still be happy? We have to like hear what the need is, bring the community along to have the whole community support a shift in how we're prioritizing the expenditures. That's a big activity. That's not just, oh, we can fix this easily. So there's a lot that has to happen there for us to actually address the inequities that we discover and to address the needs that we hear about. It's challenging. And even at the department, you look at how do we allocate funds, and it's like, okay, well, $300 for everybody. Well, Winooski sounds like they need the money a little bit more than some of the other communities. Like, do we look at do we make a recommendation about how grant funds, maybe we shouldn't be just giving a blanket amount to everybody? Maybe that's something that we need to look more carefully at. And that's hard for people to hear. And that's hard for people to accept if you're counting on that $300 or that $500. Karen?
Just circling back on your sewing machine conversation and the original suggestion of a book club, I think also there's that relationship building that makes it safe for people to tell us what they really want. So when you have a relationship with those people, they don't need to say that they want a book club because that's what you want to hear. They can say, we really need sewing machines and we need to know how to use them. So building that relationship with like all the groups in your community so that they can really tell you this would be helpful, even if it's out of the box and not something that they might expect from a library.
Meg?
Great. I want to build on so many comments. So like to your point, Karen, about the importance of relationship building, in school libraries, it's so essential. And, I think about our small public libraries or school libraries. Oftentimes we're libraries of one, right? So we might interact with a student for 6 years. They might go to their public library and have the same librarian. And so we wield a lot of positional power and influence. It's not coming from like a big city library where there's a team of librarians, unless, there are some libraries like that in the state, of course, but the model is one person, one library. And so I think it's of the utmost importance that those front facing folks, our librarians are always constantly leaning in and learning, about how to best serve all of our readers and patrons and students. I think, Jeanette, your point is so true. It's like, how much more can we do, right? Like, you can maybe barely leave the desk because you're the one person there, right? And I think about that in school libraries, that if I only focus on the kids who came through the library doors, we have an open door policy. We're not, kids don't need it. Then I would be working with only the students whose families and who feel like libraries are important in their lives. There's so many students outside my library walls. They're in my learning community, but they're not accessing the library. And I got to dig in just as hard about why they're not accessing the library as to serving the needs of those students who are coming into the library. Because we know in this age of dis and misinformation, it's so crucial to our democracy that everyone has this opportunity to feel like they belong in a library. So we get a sense of belonging, right? This whole discussion about inclusion is around belonging. And this is taxpayer dollars. It's like our legal responsibility and our ethic and our democratic responsibility to ensure that, even if it's only 1 or 2 people in your community that fit that, right? We have to amplify the needs of our historically marginalized populations because, as I said before, it serves all of us. How to listen is so important. So I think about like when we go to fund things, I totally agree, Catherine. Like maybe that we could have some sort of formula that, depending on need for the school or the library about grant funding sources, because it really, equal is not equitable. And we've got to shift some mindsets, and it's going to be hard and sticky. But I think if we have solid data and solid qualitative stories to support this, then we're going to get it. And my last point, like just for now, is like, I just came back from book group. So I missed our hour back because I have high school book group, and I've missed, it's super important to the students and to me. And a student was checking out a book, our new next book group, Man o' War, right? About a trans Arab American young person, written by an author who has transitioned. And this student uses they, them pronouns. And I went to my Destiny, and then I had to look up their email so I could send them, they wanted it on Sora as an overdrive, as an audiobook. And there's no they, them pronouns, right? So you can be male, you can be female, you can be unspecified. So I think our inequities, they are layered into so many of the stuff that we do as librarians, and we might have a voice, if we can say as a state, to Follett or whatever else, these big vendors that we use, like, you need to make these changes. They matter, the little things matter so much in terms of feeling like everyone belongs in our spaces. And to Christopher's point, because everything's changing all the time. Language changes, words changes, what we know changes, amplifying voices, more people are getting an opportunity to share. So I love this conversation. This has been the best one of the series. just another plug for April 3rd for the conference with VISLA and VLA. It's our first annual joint conference on Monday, April 3rd. I've reached out already to the conference chair. There was a cancellation. They've already like made their schedule, but there was a cancellation. And so maybe Susanna and her team would be available to present during that block. So
That
as
would
I
be
think-
great.
Yeah, I think we just have to keep talking,
Yeah.
talking leads to action.
I want to check in with Denise. Denise, did you have anything that you wanted to share that struck you today?
Oh, hello. Sorry. Wearing my mask in the office. My husband has COVID.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it happens. Well, you know, I don't know if I know people who were talking spoke a lot about the public library system, and I don't know if everyone remembers that UVM is technically public. Well, I mean, it is public, but that you can come here and use the library. And we have Overdrive too, that hopefully complements Overdrive for that the Green Mountain Consortium has as well. So I guess what struck me is that maybe there's a way for us as the university library to complement what public libraries are doing in regards to equal access for people of all either abilities or backgrounds or coming in with different language skills or language, not skills, you know, the ability to speak many different languages. And we've talked here a bit about particularly broadening some of our materials so that we have materials in multiple languages and formats. And we're trying to do a little bit, we have actually a few more options for what I would call like leisure reading, which I guess is one of the reasons people don't come to us, because they don't assume we're going to have a lot of that. And that might be why they would want to go to a library, but we are open to the public. And I think somebody, you know, in the beginning of our meeting was talking about the homeless population and specifically spoke about public libraries. But, you know, we just had an incident last week here in one of our libraries where somebody who didn't have a place to go managed to stay overnight in the building. So we do encounter those issues as well. So I guess just kind of reminding people that public libraries or public university libraries are open to you. What can we do to support all the populations? Although our collections budget is not great right now, and clearly we have some priorities when it comes to what the university's working on. But what can we do? Keep us in the mix.
When we're thinking about collections, I mean, I do think that there is something a little bit funny that happens. So it's not just collections, it's trying to sort of gel my thoughts here, but you know, one of the things that we're really glad that we did, and we got a shout out in the language access plan that Susanna shared. I noticed there was like, yay, Department of Libraries, you have this translated what is a public library document. So that's great. So you hand that to somebody and then they show up at a library and they got there because they read in their language that a public library exists. And now what? They've come in, they don't necessarily speak English, and you don't necessarily have even one book you can give them. So it's a step and it's an important step, but it can't be the final step, right? So what's the plan for all of us at that moment? This person arrives, they speak Farsi. Now what do you do? Like, who do you call? How do you know what they need? They might need a basic social service. They might need a book on elephants. Maybe their kid needs something and starts helping to translate. Maybe somebody else in the room happens to be bilingual. Probably not. And so, you know, in Vermont, we have relatively few people in each of the groups, and their needs are all important. And where are the collections for them and where are the resources for them? And it's almost like in a situation where it's like, okay, well, we know we have this group of Dari speakers in Bennington. Well, that's great. We know that you can get the keyboard cover and you can have the materials translated and maybe you'll get somewhere. But I think the language access aspect is really phenomenally challenging here with the small collections budgets and the limited resources we have statewide in a lot of those languages.
Well, and the ability to have bilingual librarians in the house at any given time for
Yeah.
even one other language.
Yeah, in Bennington, we've actually asked the Open Arms group again to come and give the whole staff a little language lesson so we can greet people and at least get the basics out. So we won't understand when they ask for the book on elephants, but we will at least be able to politely say, let me contact someone that can help us translate this. And we also don't have very many books in Dari yet either, so the chances of us having a book with elephants in it is minimal as well.
Yeah, and it may be that this is an area where when we're looking at other state library agencies, we could see we could ask what are other states doing well. Having worked in New Jersey in the first part of my career, the state library sent shelves of books in different languages based on the needs in the library, and they rotated them around. And so at least people got some books in Bengali and some books in Russian and some books in whatever, and you kind of swap it around. There are different things people do, but even doing that, the purchasing and the selection and maintenance of collections when you don't have native speakers in your team is really challenging. Meg?
Well, that's what I was thinking of, Kathy. It's like, is there like a little set that could be curated, but then it might go out of date, right? But then I was thinking, how can we use an existing structure? Like we have Clover, right, for interlibrary loan. So how can we utilize a structure like Clover to identify foreign language speakers, in our communities that you could request one through Clover, just a thought.
But that would require the foreign language collection books to be identified in a special way so that you could, I don't know, put in Spanish books and they all magically pop up.
And so having worked in San Francisco, which has a really large multilingual and pretty large linguistically isolated groups as well. We did have, you added cataloging elements that identified the language that the material is written in. And so the other thing that we had access to, that the library paid for access to and was required to do, was the same type of language, like the phone interpreters, like the same that we had Language Line, which was the same as you see at a lot of hospitals. It's a really expensive service and it was very underutilized. And that was always a little bit dismaying when we would do our annual language access ordinance survey, and it was like nobody even remembers that they have this special headset that they're supposed to plug in and hand to the community member and have the three-way conversation on the phone. Like, for all my years of promoting that, I've never actually done it in person live. Like it's one of those things. It's like, it's hard to know. It's hard to know how people will use a service if you don't have it. And then sometimes the services are underutilized when, like, kind of like our databases, you pay a lot of money and then nobody uses it. It's sort of a frustration. There's a lot to think about here. And a note from Tom McMurdo: language is identified in MARC records now, and you should be able to search by language. So that's good. My memory of that aspect is not faulty. I want to take a minute while we're thinking about the future and topics that we need to talk about and things we need to plan together, to talk about our meeting on intellectual freedom, because I think that that is really something we heard a lot about in some ways, in different ways today. So we had talked about hosting that meeting in February. And I spoke with Christopher to kind of get started on the agenda planning. And both Christopher and I are hoping that the group is amenable to moving the intellectual freedom topic as a special meeting in April, because there is no possible way that we're going to be able to pull it together by the date we had identified in mid-February. Just thinking of how much of a lift this one was to organize, and how we're still trying to develop, like, the behind the scenes to develop the templates for writing the sections of this report. I'm just concerned that it's a really important topic and I don't want it to get short shrift. So are people open to the idea of doing a special meeting in February, in April, and not having a meeting of our working group next month?
Yes.
We had originally been talking about having a working group meeting on Friday, the 17th, and that's the 17th of February, and I'm proposing not doing that, but instead potentially doing it, I think Friday what's our regular recurring? I just got lost. Fourth Friday. So the fourth Friday of March is the 24th. No, and then the fourth Friday of April would be the 28th. What do you think of the 28th of April instead of February? Okay.
That's fine.
Hey, Kathy. Oh, sorry. This is Karen. That date's not going to work for me, but of course, that doesn't mean that, the group should definitely persist.
Okay. Well, let's plan on.
I can't
I'm
make
sorry?
it there. We're on school break that week and I'll be away.
Oh,
But my Februaries and April are pretty, they're pretty tight. I would say the only, and I don't want to mess up the whole group. I can't do the 21st. I can't do the 14th. I could only do the 8th. No, I can do the 14th. No, I can't do any of them. I'm sorry.
okay. Well, let's do the 28th, because that keeps it on a pattern and it doesn't squish it too tight to the others. But that's not great to have neither
Kathy,
school librarian.
I do need to monkey wrench that. Having been
Okay.
told it's school break, I'm
Yeah.
out too.
Okay,
on the
what about the
28th.
21st? It's a special meeting. We have to notice it anyway.
21st
So-
is fine.
Let's do the 21st, because maybe we'll pick up at least one of you, Karen or Meg. Maybe Karen can come on the 21st. Okay, so I'm gonna
There's
now.
a chance. It's world champs for robotics, but we have to see if we make it first. So we'll see. If we make it, then I won't be available. But if we don't make it, I'm
Okay.
yours.
And I have something in the morning, medically. So if I'm good to go in the afternoon, I can pop in for the afternoon, but not the morning.
Okay. I am right now sending you all the invite that has removed it from the 17th of February and put it on the 21st. So you should be seeing that in your inboxes. Okay. And then the final thing, oh my gosh, there's so not room for all of this stuff to happen in 3 or 4 minutes, but I have received the information from various folks. Thank you to everybody who helped with the hold on a second, the draft staffing and salary survey. I'm going to just pop the link to it in the chat. Basically, we just have brief descriptions of the different positions now. I received some feedback from Gary Dietz, I'm saying his name wrong, I'm sure, at UVM Extension, and Gary thought it would be a good idea to include the average number of years of folks in the positions. He thought it was especially important, I think, for the professional, the librarian positions and the director positions. For now, I put it in we put it in every single section, but I wanted to check with you. Do you think it's necessary for the page position? Are there certain positions we don't need to ask the question? That we could just not have people doing math and averaging and asking everybody on staff how long they've been there? Or do you think we should just be consistent and get it for everything?
Getting information like that does point to a certain amount of stability within an entity. And that sort of idea could be important. Does make more work, but then again, you don't have to fill in every section, because the idea was to just fill in the closest section to your job title, as opposed to all the sections.
Well, the other thing is it's respectful of each of the people. You know, it would feel funny if I were a shelver at a library and then I saw, well, they don't care how long I've been here. There's no value add. I've been here for 30 years and they don't care. They only care if I'm the director. I can just imagine feeling a little resentful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll put it in all of them like it is now. Susan also had a suggestion, which was that we could combine the children or youth services librarian position number 6 with the teen services librarian position number 7. I'm of two minds about that because they are pretty, the teen services is always getting the short end of that stick.
Yeah, I have an issue with that.
Okay.
I have this 2 separate positions, so.
Yeah. I feel like we need to add something anyway, like a drop-down menu that says, you know, and if it's youth services and it goes 0 to 18, right? We should probably define that for children's services, like the years that are involved. So for number 6, define children is, what should we have as the age range? Children serves ages 0 to 12. Youth is everything 0 to 18, and teen is 13 to 18.
But adults, according to Vermont, start at 16 years old.
According to who?
The Vermont statutes say that you become an adult in a library when you're 16 years old.
Well, they say that you get your own. That's kind of like saying that I'm an adult at 14 because the Catholic Church confirmed me. Like, I don't know if I buy that.
Yeah.
Like, it's a matter of what's the like for you usually have like the high schoolers are served by the teen librarian.
Yeah, but that might go all the way up to 19 because there's kids that, they graduate at 19 and stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, why don't we say instead of, we could do 0, so children would be 0 through grade, what? Grade 6. Youth would be 0 through grade 12. And teen would be, it could be grade 6 through 12, or it could be grades 9 through 12.
I would take away the grades just for homeschooling families and just.
Oh gosh, stick to the ages. Yeah. Karen and Meg, as our youth dedicated humans, how about you I guess you're in school libraries and this is a survey for public libraries. What age? Somebody just tell me what to put. I need help at this point in the meeting.
I feel like the 0 to 12 is a good description for what would classically be a children's librarian. And the sort of 12 to 18 would be more of a teen librarian. And if you were a youth librarian, you'd do 0 to 18? Question mark.
I concur. I'm in schools, but I was in publics for many years, and I served as a children's librarian, a youth services librarian. I do think we have to disaggregate it. Story times are very different than putting together like teen movie nights.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what did we say? Youth is 0 to 18.
Yes.
Yep.
Children is 0 to 12, and teen is 13 to 18.
12 to 18.
12 to 18.
I agree with Karen because that gets the middle schoolers in there, that age.
And I'm gonna lobby as a former teen librarian and a former, I don't know, I think I was called a young adult librarian. I resist that title for some reason because it feels strange and the rest of the world doesn't know what you're talking about. Only like people who read YA literature and know it's called that know what you're talking
Right.
about.
And no teen has ever self-referred that way.
No.
Like I've never had a teen introduce themselves as, hello, I'm a young adult.
Well, I used to get a lot of questions about like, oh, my college student's a young adult. I'm like, no, it's not like that. This is I'm talking about middle and high school. I serve middle and high school kids. So I think teen is usually where that term is going rather than where it's been. I think young adult is where it's been. Who am I to say? I was only the head of the young adult section of the New Jersey Library Association for a while. I mean, who knows? Which also felt funny. I have a lot of, I don't know. I don't play the teen librarian card too often, but I'm going to do it now. Because we just have to move forward with it. So what we're doing right now is we're trying to, we've got the survey in pretty good form. It needs a little bit of editing, like formatting help right now. But if anybody sees anything glaringly wrong with these the underlined red information, that's all new. Written that way, like it's legislation, so you can find the new part. Let me know. We don't have a bookkeeper description yet. Does anybody have a bookkeeper? You want to pop one of those over to me? I'm going to take the student intern and basically just use the same that we had for the volunteers, that they're doing the same types of things that the volunteers are doing. Because that seems pretty much like a match.
I have a business manager here. Is that at all worthwhile, or are we sort of an outlier?
You might be a slight outlier. And Denise, in the last meeting, because of costs of doing the survey across all the different types, we're focusing just on the public libraries. But if you have a description of bookkeepers or finance people or business managers, that would be useful.
Okay.
That would be helpful there. I don't know how many libraries actually have like a bookkeeper. Definitely not the.
Well, we have a bookkeeper in Bennington, but goodness only knows what her job title would be.
Oh my God, this thing that Meg just put in here with Wednesday is hilarious. This suddenly I'm understanding my dance moves, which are like a combination of hers and Elaine Bennis's. Anyway.
I think in most municipal libraries, your town treasurer acts as your bookkeeper.
Well, maybe, okay, so what should we do? Bookkeeper or finance? For those who, we thought that it should be there. Wendy, do you want to see if your team can come up with a very like one sentence description?
I'll see what I can do for you.
All right, thank you. So Lucy Fortier, our contracts and grants administrator, is going to try to work her magic with this and see if we can see the best way for us to go about procuring it, bearing in mind that we were very interested in folks with local knowledge and who've worked with libraries in Vermont and who know Vermont well. So we're still working on how this will be, who will implement it and how it will be implemented. If we can get a quote for less than 10,000 from one of the folks that has a history of working with state agencies, I think that would be the best thing for us to do. So we're kind of exploring that, but if not, we'll put it out for, I think, a simplified bid, which is to try to just keep it moving along so we can get the report back get the survey out into the world and get the report back. And hopefully the timing will mean that people are done with the PLS by the time that this hits their desks in the public library world. We hope. Okay. Oh, I want to share one more thing. Not all of the people who gave testimony in written form were here today. So I want to be sure, working group members, that you know that we also got testimony in written form from Abby Adams, of the Platt Memorial Library in Shoreham. Abby's the library director. Dana Hart wasn't able to be with us today. She is the library director at Middlebury's Ilsley Public Library. We received written testimony from Mona Tolba, who is a Fletcher Free Library Commissioner in Burlington, Vermont, and from Jane Potter, who's a member of the public, I believe, in White River Junction, Vermont, and from Ruth Shattuck Bernstein, who's a librarian from the Salisbury Free Public Library. I also want to quickly correct my pronunciation of Gary's last name. It is pronounced Diesel. Jeanette Schaefer, help me if you want to. But I said it completely wrong. I'm sorry, Gary. But it was really nice of him, I think, to look at our survey and to give input on it. And we are just 5 minutes over time, and I'm going to, if it's all right with everybody here, adjourn the meeting because this has been a long one, but a good one. And I want to thank you all for your time today, and thank you all for your continued efforts. And we'll next convene in March.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.